If there's one thing that Ukraine needs more of, but never quite seemed to get, it's more air defense systems. With Russia intensifying its aerial campaign, air defenses could be the difference maker that allows Ukraine to hold on long enough for its own long-range strikes to truly take effect. And the UK has just extended a massive helping hand. It's flipped the script of the war in Ukraine's favour by delivering Martlet missiles months ahead of schedule. Now Ukraine has what it needs to confront what's likely to be a renewed aerial assault by Russia as the Ukraine war moves into its fourth winter. On October 11, Interesting Engineering reported that the UK has delivered hundreds of its lightweight multirole missiles, which are colloquially known as the Martlet, to Ukraine as part of a $2.15 billion deal that sees the UK and Ukraine working together to develop weapons that are perfect for taking down Vladimir Putin. The UK Ministry of Defence released a statement which included a quote from the UK's Minister for Defence Readiness, Luke Pollard. The UK is stepping up our ironclad commitment to help Ukraine defend itself against Russia's illegal invasion. This year alone, we're spending £4.5 billion, approximately $6 billion, on military support for Ukraine more than ever before. The message to Putin is clear. The UK is throwing the full weight of its support behind Ukraine. In an October 19 video covering the deal, Wes O'Donnell provides some more numbers. He says that Ukraine is set to receive 5,000 Martlet missiles, along with a bevy of the RapidRanger launchers that Ukraine needs to fire them. It appears this initial delivery isn't the full 5,000, though there's a very good reason for that. The UK was supposed to deliver the Martlets Ukraine just received in 5 months. Instead, it's roared ahead of schedule to ensure that Ukraine has access to missiles that it desperately needs to defend itself against Russia's campaign of aerial aggression during the winter months of 2025. As O'Donnell puts it, the UK is
giving Ukraine a massive bump in short-range air defense capability right as Russia prepares for its annual winter missile tantrum.
The announcement of the delivery came just days before the UK's Royal Navy confirmed that the Martlet had passed a final series of day and night trials. The missile proved itself combat ready by blasting drones out of the sky, first in a deployment off the coast of Wales and later during a test in the French Mediterranean region. The missiles left behind nothing but wreckage, the Royal Navy says. And it's not just Ukraine that's going to be getting them. The UK is building its own stockpile of Martlets, in addition to selling some to India in a deal worth almost $470 million. This isn't any old air defense missile that Ukraine has just received. It's also not a missile that the UK is pulling out of its aging stockpiles to give to Ukraine, rather than decommissioning it. The Martlet is a now fully operational weapon first fielded in 2021, with full operational capability just declared in October 2025. With help from Ukraine, the UK has built a drone-busting missile that seems like it was custom-made to counteract the constant long-range strikes Russia conducts against Ukraine. The Martlet isn't just about making Ukraine stronger, it's the UK sending a signal to Putin that it understands the strategy Russia will use in a potential future war with NATO, and it's already building weapons to counter that strategy. But that's in the future. Right now, Ukraine will just be happy to have the first several hundred of a bumper Martlet shipment arriving on its shores. It's worth pointing out that the UK delivered Martlet missiles to Ukraine under its official gifting program, alongside a separate export finance framework for future missiles. This isn't just military aid, but rather the result of a growing partnership that will be explored further later in the video. For now, it's enough to know that this was a $2 billion plus deal that's benefited the UK as much as it stands to benefit Ukraine. Interesting Engineering notes that the deal is part of a joint framework between the UK and Ukraine that's helped to create 200 jobs in Northern Ireland, in addition to supporting 700 more across the full Martlet supply chain. Ukraine's largest drone manufacturer, UKR Spec Systems, has also committed almost $270 million to the creation of UK-based production facilities that will create another 500 jobs. This is a full-on quid pro quo situation, and it's the sort of joint venture that will have Putin shaking in his boots. Speaking of being terrified, Putin will not be happy to hear about what the Martlet brings to the table for Ukraine. In a report confirming that the missile has achieved full operating capability, Navy Lookout says that each Martlet missile is capable of hitting speeds of Mach 1.5, and it's laser guided by whomever fires it to ensure it scores a direct hit on whatever it's being targeted. don't underestimate the importance of this speed. While many Russian missiles can also exceed the speed of sound, the Shahed-type drone Russia is using to bombard Ukraine can't. Even the jet-powered Gerin 3, which the Center for Strategic and International Studies reported on back in May, doesn't even get close. That drone can reportedly hit a top speed of about 372.8 miles per hour. The Martlet exceeds that top speed, meaning even Russia's most advanced long-range drones don't have a chance of escaping when Martlets are on their tails. Interesting Engineering adds a few more details about the Martlet, noting that it's been built from the ground up to shoot down slower-moving targets. Drones are obviously among them, though the missile is also capable of hitting low-flying aircraft and helicopters. That's great for Ukraine. It means its air defenders can focus even faster and more powerful air defense systems, such as the US-made Patriot on Russia's missiles and fighter jets, while the Martlets take out the smaller and more numerous threats. A single Martlet missile weighs about 29 pounds. Interesting Engineering adds. That low weight is vital due to the intended portability of the missile and the system used to fire it, as will be explained in a moment. A Martlet can travel up to 5 miles, making it a great short-range air defense option that the outlet says can fill the critical gap between short-range man-pads and medium-range systems, such as NASAMS or IRIS-T. It uses laser beam riding guidance or SALCOs, allowing precise targeting and strong resistance to jamming. Ukraine will also be delighted by the low cost of the Martlet. O'Donnell says that Ukraine can rattle off several Martlets for the cost of a single Patriot missile. Given that Patriot missiles cost around $4 million each, that means a Martlet is significantly cheaper, with open source estimates placing its cost in the tens of thousands of dollars per unit, making it a far more economical way for Ukraine to defend against incoming drones and missiles. The more cost-effective the weapon, the more of it that Ukraine can afford to deploy against Russia. However, it may not be the missile itself that's the real highlight here. As O'Donnell adds, the Martlet can be launched from a truck, a boat, or even from a shoulder-mounted launcher, which brings us to the second part of the deal between Ukraine and the UK, the RapidRanger. Without this vital delivery system, Ukraine wouldn't be able to do much of anything with the 5,000 Martlet missiles that it's set to receive. And with the RapidRanger, Ukraine gets an immense amount of portability to go along with the speed and power of its new missiles. Thales, which is the Belfast-based company that developed both the Martlet and the RapidRanger, says that the launcher weighs less than 1,100 pounds, which makes it installable on most of Ukraine's trucks. The system can also detect incoming targets from little over 9 miles away and is able to neutralize those targets using Martlet missiles once it comes within 4.3 miles. Thales adds that the RapidRanger is highly automated, suggesting that Ukraine's new launcher can track targets and launch missiles with minimal human intervention. Plus, it can integrate with Ukraine's other weapons and air defense systems. The extremely versatile system can be integrated into a network-enabled force structure, coordinated with early warning command and control (C2) systems, and is capable of integrating and firing a range of missiles, including Thales' Starstreak and LMM, Thales claims. The LMM is the Martlet. As for the Starstreak, that's another boon for Ukraine. Ukraine received a stockpile of those missiles back in 2024, with its soldiers having been training to use them since 2022. What Ukraine gets with the RapidRanger is both a delivery vehicle for its new missiles and one that will make the Starstreaks that it hasn't used yet even more effective against Russia. Defense Express provides a little extra information as it notes that the RapidRanger offers electro-optical sighting, which is likely a reference to the laser mentioned earlier, and that Ukraine even has the option of using an additional radar. Presumably, this radar will increase the RapidRanger's detection range, which opens up the possibility of the RapidRanger detecting a drone at a large distance so that Ukraine's operators can drive the launcher to the appropriate position ahead of time. And it's in the word drive that the significance of the RapidRanger for Ukraine becomes clear. Portability lies at the heart of the system, which means that Ukraine can drive it to any location where it believes Russia may strike with one of its drone bombardments. It's also important to consider what this mobility means from a defensive standpoint. A static air defense system can be targeted with follow-up artillery and drone strikes after it's been used to fend off Russia's aerial assaults. With the RapidRanger, Ukraine can rattle off as many of its Martlet missiles as it needs before getting out of dodge. Russia will have a hard time retaliating. The RapidRanger's mobility makes it far harder to hit than static systems, and taking one out would be more about luck than judgment. As O'Donnell notes,
It's fast, it's networked, and it's highly mobile, the kind of pop-up air defense system that can fire and move before the Russians even realize they're under attack.
He adds that the networking capabilities of this launcher could end up being a vital part of Ukraine's future air defense strategy. Multiple RapidRangers can link up and share targeting data, which O'Donnell says creates a web of overlapping protection zones. In other words, Ukraine might not even need to drive the RapidRanger that detects an incoming threat to the site of the threat. The targeting data could simply be sent to another RapidRanger that's closer to the intended strike zone, and that will be all that's needed for Martlets to go flying. So, to say that the UK has just delivered big for Ukraine here is an understatement. With hundreds of Martlet missiles and several RapidRangers already heading to Ukraine, and more on their way by early 2026, Ukraine has an important new defensive weapon that makes Russia's aerial strikes far less effective. The Martlet matters, perhaps more than many realise, and these are the reasons why. Earlier, the video touched on the partnership between the UK and Ukraine that made this delivery possible. That partnership may be the worst thing to come out of this news from Putin's perspective, because it shows that the UK is all in on Ukraine's survival against Russia. This delivery of Martlets is just another example of the strengthening of the relationship between the UK and Ukraine, Interesting Engineering says. And it's also the latest weapon to come out of the two countries' 100-year partnership. Though somewhat hyperbolic in name, the 100-year partnership was always intended to communicate the UK's belief in a future where Ukraine very much exists. The partnership was created in January, with the UK's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, travelling to Ukraine to make it official. Under the 100-year partnership, the UK will work with Ukraine on advances in scientific and technological products, under which the Martlet falls. The two countries also have a boosted military collaboration that includes the creation of maritime security framework covering the Black, Baltic and Azov Seas, all of which is designed to combat Russian aggression. The UK has even committed to creating a grain verification system it can use to filter out stolen Ukrainian grain that Russia attempts to import to the UK. As Starmer put it at the time of signing the partnership documents, "This is not just about the here and now, it's also about an investment in our two countries for the next century, bringing together technology development, scientific advances and cultural exchanges, and harnessing the phenomenal innovation shown by Ukraine in recent years for generations to come." The creation of the 100-year partnership was just the first step in the UK voluntarily taking up the mantle of leading other nations in their support of Ukraine. Several other steps have been taken since. For instance, the UK spearheaded the creation of the Coalition of the Willing, which is a collective of Ukraine's European partners. This coalition, beyond supporting Ukraine in its war with Russia, has also claimed that it would like to be responsible for offering security guarantees to Ukraine should an adequate peace deal be signed with Russia. Starmer was very clear about what the creation of this coalition could mean for the future. The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air, together with others. Europe must do the heavy lifting, Starmer said in March. Though some might see this as the UK appeasing US President Trump, who was decidedly anti-Ukraine back in March, it goes much deeper than that. Europe doing the heavy lifting was as much about the UK building on its 100-year partnership with Ukraine as it was a signal to Trump that Europe was prepared to pull more weight. As the Atlantic Council said a couple of weeks after the UK announced the Coalition of the Willing, the UK has taken the lead in attempting to boost support for Ukraine. And it's been doing it all year. It was the UK that did much of the behind-the-scenes work to help Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky restore the damage done by his turbulent meeting with Trump and US Vice President J.D. Vance in February. The Atlantic Council also notes that the UK has been one of the biggest individual backers of Ukraine ever since Putin launched his invasion. Beyond sending direct military aid, the UK helps Ukraine by offering intelligence, cybersecurity, and counters to Russia's hybrid threats, the outlet notes. This is no partnership on paper only. The UK is dedicated to doing everything it can to strengthen Ukraine, like the early arrival of Martlets is yet another example. And speaking about the Martlet delivery, O'Donnell says,
"This is industrial diplomacy at its finest. The UK gets to strengthen its defense base, Ukraine gets its interceptors early, and Russia gets explosions."
That's just what a good defense partnership is supposed to be about. The UK, by both offering support and following through on its promises, is serving as an example to the rest of Ukraine's allies what needs to be done to ensure Russia doesn't win its war. As O'Donnell adds,
Early Martlet shipment combined with the UK's delivery of Storm Shadow cruise missiles and Challenger 2 tanks has cemented Britain's role as Ukraine's most proactive ally.
Who knows? Where the UK leads, others might soon follow, which would only be good news for Ukraine in the future. As for the more direct impact of the early Martlet arrival, Ukraine has been crying out for more air defense systems for a long time. Back on November 24, 2024, Zelensky was making the point that the protection of Ukraine's skies was absolutely critical if Ukraine were to stand a real chance of winning the war against Russia. At the time, Russia had spent the previous week launching 800 guided aerial bombs, 460 long-range drones, and 20 missiles at Ukraine. It's only gotten a lot worse since. Fast forward almost a year, and Russia's aerial campaign against Ukraine is stronger than ever. On October 17, The Guardian reported that Russia had launched 1,400 glide bombs, 92 missiles, and a staggering 3,000 drones at Ukraine in the period between October 5 and October 12 alone. Compare those to the weekly numbers seen in November 2024 and it becomes evident how clear the escalation is. More than 6 times the number of drones, around 600 more bombs, and 72 missiles in a week shows us that Putin has settled on his new favourite tactic for hurting Ukraine. As the war moves deeper into winter, which leads to ground-based operations becoming less effective, these aerial bombardments are likely to get even more intense. For Ukraine, that means the early arrival of the UK's Martlets couldn't have been timed any better. As O'Donnell points out,
now, this delivery happened at the perfect moment. As winter sets in, Russia traditionally ramps up its drone and missile attacks. They hit power plants, heating infrastructure, and civilian housing.
Ukraine needs to be prepared for all of this, which is why it spent so long calling out for more air defense systems. Thanks to the UK, Ukraine will be more prepared than it's been in the past to deal with Russia's winter blitz. And with a little bit of luck, more air defenses may be coming to Ukraine. On October 20, Politico reported that the US and Ukraine are preparing to sign a contract for the delivery of 25 Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine. Those Patriots won't arrive all at once, as Zelensky notes. The difficulty lies in the production queue. A line of countries that have signed relevant contracts will be receiving these 25 systems over the years with different quantities each year, Zelensky said, before adding that the White House can change the queue if there is political will. It was mentioned earlier that the UK is trying to lead the way when it comes to the support of Ukraine. Perhaps this offers the perfect example of how the rest of Europe could follow the UK's lead. If some of the countries that are due Patriot systems allow Ukraine to jump the queue, Ukraine's air defences go from strengthened to formidable. More Patriots plus thousands of Martlets will ensure Ukraine makes it through a tough winter. And the longer Ukraine survives, the more chance there is that Russia will collapse in on itself. That collapse may already be happening. Even Putin's propagandists are turning against him, as one of Russia's most recognizable voices has been forced to admit that Russia has underestimated Ukraine. The war may never end, and it's Putin's mouthpieces that are delivering the message, as you'll discover in our video. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to The Military Show for more reports on the fruits of the partnership between the UK and Ukraine.